The sound of Emeka's hammer echoed softly in the morning haze, beating rhythmically against worn leather as he sat on a small wooden stool outside his weathered workshop. His hands, darkened by years of glue and dust, moved with quiet skill. Life in the sleepy town of Umwokwu was simple, slow-moving, filled with dust, sweat, and the smell of firewood smoke. But for Emeka, it was enough. He had love. He had purpose. And when Amara went into labor with their twin girls, he had joy. The day they were born, the clouds split with sunshine. Emeka had never wept so openly. Two beautiful girls, tiny and soft, one resting on each of his forearms as the midwife wiped sweat from Amara's brow. He named them Adaora and Chisholm, his crown and his comfort. Amara smiled faintly, but something behind her eyes was already distant, like she had watched the miracle from 1,000 miles away. In the days that followed, Amara grew quiet, detached. Emeka noticed it, the way she lingered by the window when flashy cars passed, the way she sighed when their pot of soup finished too early. She stopped breastfeeding the babies, saying she was tired. She started going out more, staying longer. Then one day, he saw her standing at the edge of their compound, talking to a man with a gold chain thick as a hose and a smile too smooth to trust. The man drove a sleek black SUV with tinted windows. Emeka watched from a distance, a sinking feeling in his chest. That night, she didn't come home. When she returned the next morning, she said nothing. Just bathed, changed her clothes, and began packing. "Where are you going?" Emeka asked, heart pounding. "I can't do this, Emeka," she said without looking at him. "I didn't sign up to suffer." He moved closer, desperate. "Amara, we have twins. They need you. I need you." She laughed bitterly. "They'll be fine. You? You're too content with poverty. That man, he can give me the life I deserve. Amara, please." But she had already picked up her small bag and walked out. The twins cried that night, cried with a kind of hunger only a mother could quiet. Emeka held them both, one on each shoulder, trying to hush their sobs with lullabies he barely remembered. His chest felt heavy, not just from the weight of the children, but from shame. The next morning, the whispers began. Is it true Amara left him? She went with that Lagos man, the one with money. Ehia. Poor Emeka. He didn't answer them. He kept sewing, kept hammering. His girls would not suffer. They would never feel abandoned, even if he had been. The nights were the hardest, when the world went quiet and only the soft rustle of banana trees whispered through the cracked window. Emeka would sit on the floor between two small wooden cribs, gently rocking them with his feet. Adaora's cries came first, sharp and commanding, like she'd been born to lead. Chisholm followed, softer but stubborn, never wanting to be left out. He'd hum old Igbo lullabies, barely remembering the words, but the melody was enough to calm them. Some nights he dozed off with one twin on each arm, his back resting against the cold wall. By day he became two men, shoemaker by trade, father by duty. His hands were always covered in polish and glue, yet they still managed to comb tiny braids, button school uniforms, and scoop steaming yam porridge into eager mouths. He patched more souls than he could count, and on the slow days, he'd walk from compound to compound offering his craft, twins trailing behind him like obedient shadows. "Papa, why do people stare at us?" Chisholm once asked. Emeka smiled gently. "Because you're miracles." But behind the smile was exhaustion and whispers. "She still hasn't come back? Poor man, raising twins alone. Maybe she's cursed him." He heard it all, but he never replied. He refused to let bitterness shape his daughters. When they asked about their mother, he never lied. But he never gave them the full truth either. "She's gone," he'd say softly, eyes fixed on the horizon. "But you have me." Adaora grew into a fierce, inquisitive girl. She questioned everything, from teachers to tradition, and always fought for the underdog. Her favorite game was pretending to be a lawyer, defending Chisholm from made-up crimes like eating meat twice. Chisholm, ever gentle, would giggle and say, "I accept the punishment. if Papa's cooking is the jail food. Chisholm had a gift with her hands, drawing dresses, braiding hair, repurposing Emeka's old wrappers into colourful skirts for her dolls. She saw beauty in everything, even in their tiny compound that leaked when it rained. Emeka watched them with quiet pride, often sitting in the shadows of their laughter, grateful they had never seen him break. He worked late into the nights, sometimes sewing by candlelight when any PA failed again. Every naira was stretched, every dream carefully fed with hope. He denied himself new clothes, decent food, and even medical treatment when his cough worsened, just to pay their school fees. But he never complained. His girls were growing, learning, smiling, and that was enough. Time moved like a quiet breeze through the town of Umuokwu, and before anyone noticed, the little girls who once tugged at Emeka's wrapper were now women. Adaora stood tall in her black and white wig, commanding courtrooms with a fire in her eyes that startled even seasoned judges. She was known for her precision, her refusal to be intimidated, and the quiet way she always paused before delivering her final argument, like she was listening for something deeper. Chisholm bloomed differently. Her world was softer, more colourful. Her boutique sat proudly at the corner of Ojukwu Street, where mannequins dressed in Ankara gowns smiled through glass. Her fingers worked magic with fabric, sewing stories into every hem, threading dreams into each design. Brides came from other towns just to have her stitch their joy. She was gentle, warm, the one who still brought Emeka hot tea on cold mornings. And Emeka, he aged but gracefully. The lines on his face told stories of hunger, laughter, loss, and silent victories. He still mended shoes outside the house, even though both daughters begged him to stop. But he said it wasn't about money. It was his rhythm, his way of staying close to the earth. Yet, in the quiet moments, when the wind shifted or someone mentioned Lagos, his eyes drifted. Amara's shadow still followed him, not with anger, but with unanswered questions. One evening, Adaora came home late, briefcase in hand, brows furrowed in thought. She greeted Emeka distractedly, her voice tight. "I got assigned a new case, Papa. High profile. Woman's accused of defrauding widows. Millions gone." She dropped the file on the table and opened it, flipping through the documents. Emeka nodded slowly, proud as always, but something in her tone made him look up. "She doesn't seem like the type, though," Adaora said, tilting her head. "Her photo, I don't know. Something feels off." Emeka walked over to look. His heart stumbled before his feet did. There on the page, aged, tired but unmistakable, was the face of Amara. His fingers trembled as they grazed the edge of the photo. He hadn't seen her in over 2 decades, but her eyes, they hadn't changed. He swallowed hard. Something was about to unravel. Adaora sat alone in her office, the overhead light buzzing faintly as the city dimmed outside. Stacks of files surrounded her, but her eyes were fixed on just one, the fraud case that had started causing a strange ache in her chest. She flipped open the document again, scanning the details. Embezzlement, identity theft, defrauding widows of their pensions. But it wasn't the crime that disturbed her, it was the photo. The woman's face stared back at her, hollow but strangely familiar. Her eyes were weary, her skin sagged in places, and her once lustrous hair was now dull and tied back in a simple scarf. Yet there was something in her jawline, the way her lips pressed together, a haunting pull. Adaora had no memory of her mother, but this woman sparked something she couldn't name. She printed the photo, slid it into her bag, and drove home in silence. Dinner was quiet. Emeka sat at the head of the table, spooning okra soup into his bowl while Chisholm rambled about fabric orders and a new client from Port Harcourt. Adaora barely touched her food. "Papa," she said suddenly, interrupting the rhythm of the evening. "Can I show you something?" Emeka raised his brow but nodded. Adaora pulled the photo from her bag and slid it across the table. It stopped in front of him. His hand froze midway to his mouth. He stared. The spoon clattered against the ceramic plate. His breath left him like he'd been punched. Chisholm's laughter faded. Silence bloomed. Emeka's eyes stayed locked on the photo, unmoving, his fingers trembling slightly as he reached out to touch it. Then, in a voice softer than either daughter had ever heard, he whispered, "Amara." Chisholm blinked. "Amara? Papa? Who's that?" He sat back slowly, the weight of 2 decades settling on his shoulders like dust returning to forgotten furniture. "She's your mother," he said, eyes never leaving the photo. "The woman in that picture." Adaora's mouth opened, closed. "What?" "She left when you were babies," Emeka continued, voice steadying. "She followed a man who promised her the world. I didn't want to poison your hearts, so I said she was gone. I never said how." Chisholm looked pale. "So, all this time? All this time I carried the lie," he said, his tone raw. "I wanted to protect you from the pain, from the shame." Adaora stood slowly, heart thundering. The woman she was prosecuting was her mother. Suddenly, the law wasn't lines on paper anymore. It was blood, history, wounds that had never truly healed. Something had been set in motion, and there would be no turning back. Sleep eluded Adaora that night. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. The photo of Amara burned into the back of her eyelids. Her mind was loud, filled with memories she hadn't invited. Birthdays where only Emeka clapped for her. School events where she watched other mothers fuss over their children. Moments she told herself didn't matter. But they did. They always had. She remembered asking Emeka once, at age 10, why all the other kids had mothers. He had smiled, a tired, hollow kind of smile, and said, "Some stories are too heavy for children." Back then, she accepted it. Now that story had found her, wearing a prison uniform and accused of betraying the most vulnerable. Morning crept in, and with it came a stiffness in her chest. She met Chisholm in the kitchen, who handed her a cup of tea without a word. "She's still our mother," Chisholm said softly, eyes avoiding hers. "She left us," Adaora snapped, more at herself than her sister. "She also might not be guilty," Chisholm replied. "Isn't that your job? To fight for the truth, even when it's uncomfortable?" Adaora swallowed hard. Emeka entered quietly, his presence calming as always. He didn't say much, just placed a gentle hand on her shoulder before walking out. That was his way, never pushing, always trusting she would find her way through. But this was different. Back in court, Adaora sat straighter than usual, but her fingers curled tightly around her pen. Amara was led in again, hands cuffed, eyes dim but still holding fragments of pride. Their eyes met. Neither flinched. She had prosecuted killers, rapists, thieves. But this was something else, something primal. A question of blood and betrayal, of what justice really meant when the person in the dock once held you in her arms, even if just for a moment. As the judge called the session to order, Adaora inhaled deeply, forcing her face into neutrality. But beneath the surface, a storm brewed. Her mother's fate might rest in her hands. The law was supposed to be her shield. But what happens when it becomes a mirror? She wasn't sure if she was walking into a courtroom or into the past. The courtroom was quiet, too quiet. The kind of silence that made every cough sound like thunder, every shuffling paper a scream. Adaora rose slowly, heels clicking against the tiled floor as she approached the witness box. Her heart thudded beneath her robe, but her face remained composed, almost cold. On the outside, she was every bit the confident lawyer. Inside, she was a daughter on the edge of a cliff. Amara sat in the dock, her wrists resting limply on the wood, her eyes dull. She had barely looked up since the session began. The air was thick with tension. "Mrs. Ease," Adaora began, her voice smooth but tight. "Can you walk this court through your relationship with the man known as Chief Obiora?" Amara blinked slowly. "He was my partner," At the time, I thought he was my husband. I trusted him." "You trusted him with your life?" Adaora pressed, eyes narrowing. "Your name? Your documents? Your identity?" Amara hesitated. "Yes." "And in that trust, would you say you lost things? Or gave them away?" The question hit like a slap. Amara shifted uncomfortably. "I lost them," she whispered. "He promised me the world and left me in hell." Adaora's fingers gripped her file tightly. Her mouth was dry, but she pushed on. "Do you have children, Mrs. Ease?" Amara's head jerked up, startled by the question. The room seemed to inhale. She faltered, voice cracking. "Yes, twin girls. I had twin girls." Adaora stepped closer. "Where are they now?" Amara looked down. Her lips quivered. I don't know." "When did you last see them?" 25 years ago." Her voice was barely a whisper. "Why did you leave them?" Tears slid silently down Amara's face. "Because I was told they'd die if I stayed. Obiora said he'd kill them. I thought I was protecting them. I thought I'd come back for them." Adaora's breath hitched. Her next words came slower, more deliberate. "If those girls stood before you now, what would you say?" Amara looked up, eyes swimming with guilt and confusion. "I'd tell them I never stopped thinking about them, that I'm sorry, that I was weak." A beat of silence. Then Adaora took a step forward. "Look at me, Mrs. Ease." Amara's gaze lifted. "My name is Adaora Emeka," she said clearly, voice trembling. "I am one of those girls." The room erupted. Gasps shot through the air like gunfire. Someone in the gallery dropped a phone. The judge banged his gavel for silence, but the moment had cracked the walls of the courtroom. Amara stared. Her face drained of all colour. She rose shakily from her seat, then dropped to her knees in the dock. "Adaora," she croaked. "Adaora, my baby." Sobs racked her body as she buried her face in her hands. "God, no. I didn't know. I didn't know." The judge gave the floor back to Adaora, who stood frozen, fighting back tears. Amara, still on her knees, raised her head again. "He used me. Obiora. He took my passport, my signature, my name. He registered businesses under me. I had no idea what he was doing until it was too late." "And when you did?" Adaora asked, her voice shaking. "I ran," Amara said. "But it wasn't far enough, and I was already ruined." Silence returned to the courtroom, but it wasn't empty. It was heavy, sacred, broken. The truth had been spoken. But at what cost? The chambers felt colder than usual. Adaora sat by the window, watching rain trace slow lines down the glass. Papers lay untouched on the table, and her wig rested silently beside her. Her mind was no longer with statutes and case files. It was caught between blood and justice, between the echo of a mother's sobs and the weight of her own name. She had spent years preparing to defend the law, to uphold it without emotion. But no professor had ever prepared her for this, standing in court, heart aching, knowing the woman in the dock once kissed her forehead and disappeared. A soft knock broke her thoughts. Emeka stepped in, a flask of tea in his hand, wearing his worn wrapper and a tired smile. He sat across from her. "I was angry for a long time," he began, voice steady. "But anger doesn't raise children. Love does." Adaora looked away, swallowing the lump in her throat. "She left us," she whispered. "She did," he said, "and that hurt, but now she's broken. You've seen it." Silence fell between them. "What should I do, Papa?" she finally asked. Emeka leaned in. "Do what is right, not what is easy. I trust you." Later at home, Chisholm curled beside her on the couch, barefoot, flipping through old sketchbooks. She didn't say much, but her presence was grounding. "Justice isn't always clean," Chisholm said, almost absent-mindedly. "Sometimes it's messy. Sometimes it means forgiving people who don't deserve it. Yet," Adaora turned to her sister, "and what if I'm wrong?" Chisholm met her gaze. "Then, at least you chose truth with your eyes open." The next morning, Adaora stood before the mirror, adjusting her collar with new resolve. The storm inside her had quieted. Not gone, but clearer now. She wasn't going back to court to save a mother or punish one. She was going to seek truth, however it looked, even if it bled. As she stepped into the courtroom once again, the gavel sounded, eyes turned, papers shuffled. But Adaora's steps were steady. Her voice would not shake today. Her judgment would not be born from vengeance or pity, but from wisdom. She had made her decision. And this time, it would not be just for Amara. It would be for herself. The courtroom was still, the kind of silence that pressed against your skin and made you hyper-aware of your own breath. Adaora stood in the center, robes falling cleanly over her shoulders, eyes trained on the judge. Her hands trembled only slightly, buried in the folds of her notes, yet her voice, when it came, was steady. "My lord," she began, her gaze sweeping the room but avoiding Amara's face. "We live in a nation where justice must not only be done, but be seen to be done. And yet, justice is not always black and white. Sometimes it arrives clothed in sorrow and layered in mistakes." She took a breath. The woman before this court is not innocent of negligence. She was complicit in silence, perhaps too trusting, perhaps too weak to walk away sooner. But she was not the architect of this crime. She was the vessel used, her documents forged, her identity hijacked, her name dragged through the mud by a man who disappeared the moment consequences arrived. The judge watched her keenly. Even the prosecution lawyer leaned back, thoughtful. She didn't steal. She didn't sign those contracts. The digital evidence shows her signature appeared on files days she was admitted in a clinic. Her accounts were emptied as fast as they were credited. She was as much a victim as the widows she's accused of scamming. And though the law does not excuse ignorance, it must distinguish between a thief and a pawn. Amara sat in the dock, eyes wide and glassy. She didn't expect the defense. Not from Adaora. Not from the daughter she thought she'd lost forever. "I am not standing here as her child," Adaora added, her voice gentler now. "I stand as a lawyer of this court, and I ask, not for pardon, but for truth. For justice served without cruelty. For mercy where it is due." The judge lowered his glasses, scribbled something on a pad, then looked up. "In light of the compelling evidence and the circumstances of the defendant's manipulation, this court will not proceed with full sentencing. Mrs. Amara Ease is hereby placed on 2 years probation with mandatory public service at St. Agnes Widow Foundation, under supervision. Let her serve those she was accused of betraying." The gavel struck. Amara gasped softly, her body sagging in the dock. Whispers filled the courtroom, some shocked, others satisfied. Adaora's shoulders dropped as she returned to her seat, the fire in her chest now replaced with exhaustion. Outside, the sun blazed down. The courthouse steps buzzed with people, reporters, murmurs. Amara stood by the gate, waiting. Her scarf was pulled tighter around her hair, her eyes red but hopeful. Chisholm exited first, arm linked with Adaora, but slowed when they saw her. Amara took a hesitant step forward. I know I don't deserve anything," she said, her voice raspy, "but thank you for standing for me." Adaora looked at her, long and hard, not with anger, not with love, with something softer, something unsure. "You have a long way to go," she replied quietly. Amara nodded, her lips trembling. "I'll wait. I'll prove it." Chisholm offered the smallest of smiles. Adaora didn't, but she didn't walk away either. The gate behind them creaked open. For the first time in 25 years, they didn't run from each other. They stood in the light, and somewhere, deep within the silence, the healing began. The late afternoon sun stretched across the compound like a warm blanket, casting soft shadows on the red earth. Emeka sat on his old wooden stool beneath the mango tree, gently polishing a pair of worn leather shoes with rhythmic strokes. His fingers moved with ease. This was a ritual that had never left him. Not even when life tried to take everything else. Chisholm lay on a mat nearby, sketch pad balanced on her knees, charcoal pencil dancing across the page as she brought a new dress design to life. Beside her, Adara sat with a book resting on her lap, her eyes scanning each page, but her mind clearly drifting elsewhere. The quiet between them was not heavy, it was comfortable. It was the kind that only comes after storms have passed. From beyond the rusted gate, footsteps paused. Amara stood still just outside the compound. She wore a plain brown wrapper and blouse, a scarf tied neatly around her braided hair. Her face was thinner now, lines carved deep by time and regret. She didn't call out. She just watched the life she once walked away from. Emeka looked up from his shoes and saw her. Their eyes met. No anger, no blame, just recognition and history. He gave her a small nod, brief, subtle but meaningful. A silent acknowledgement of the woman who once shared his home, his dreams, and who still, somehow, remained tethered to the family she left behind. Amara's lips parted slightly, but no words came. She didn't move forward, didn't knock. She simply stood there. Chisholm noticed first. She didn't speak. She only looked at Adora, then back at the gate. Adara didn't turn her head, but she closed her book slowly, as though sensing something shift in the air. No one said a word. The gate stayed closed, but it didn't feel final. Emeka returned to his shoes. Chisholm continued her sketch. Adora folded her arms and leaned back, eyes toward the gate but unfocused. Maybe tomorrow. Maybe next week. Maybe someday. For now, Amara turned and walked away. But she left behind a quiet promise, and 3 hearts that no longer hated her for leaving. Just hearts still learning how to forgive. If you were moved by this story and want more powerful emotional narratives like this, please subscribe to your channel name. Join us as we continue to share stories of love, betrayal, redemption, and hope, crafted to touch the heart and stir the soul. Don't forget to like, comment, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a story. Thank you for watching.